Great. So it is 11 a.m., so let's get started. Thank you all so much for joining today. My name is Kate Ayers, and I am the Community Education Specialist here at Solar Oregon. And welcome to our How to Go Solar event. So first, the agenda breakdown, we're going to talk a little bit about how solar works. We'll go over some of the key things to look at when looking at is your home right for solar. We'll also talk about solar incentives. And then finally, we're going to watch a little video about a solar story. So first, to go over Solar Oregon, we are a nonprofit here in Portland that has been around for over 40 years now. We've focused on education, outreach, community, and advocacy surrounding renewable energy, specifically solar energy. Some of the things that we offer are our basics of solar or our how to go solars, which you are in right now. We also do solar tours. We have a solar winery tour coming up in August, and we also do our Go Zero tours. We also help with Solarize campaigns, which are a great way to get a lot of people to go solar at once. And finally, we always kind of are really interested in peer-to-peer education surrounding solar energy. So if you'd like to support our work, we are a nonprofit and a member run. If you would like to become a member, we really appreciate the support. Or if you would like to donate, you can go to that bit.ly/solar donate. And if you are already a member on this call, thank you so much for your support of our work. One final thing to touch on is to just say a big thank you to Energy Trust of Oregon for supporting this event. So before we get moving, I'm sure that most of us are pretty aware of Zoom now with COVID, but just to go over a couple pieces really quick, we do have a Q&A button on the Zoom, and please feel free to ask any questions that you may have throughout this presentation, because we will make sure to go over them all at the end of the event. And finally, we are going to do a couple of polls really quick to get us started. So the first poll that I'm going to launch right now is just asking where you're tuning in from. So this really helps gauge kind of the audiences that we're reaching and kind of where we may still need to do some further outreach. So your participation in this poll is really appreciated. Great. I'll give it just a couple more seconds. I know we do have someone on the phone and polls are not available for that, unfortunately. Great. So it looks like we've got a couple people from the Willamette Valley and from Portland. Thank you all so much for being here. So I'm going to do two more polls. This poll is our demographics poll. This is completely anonymous, but this information really helps us to understand the audiences we're reaching, where we may still need to do some further outreach. So if you're willing to participate in this, it is really appreciated and really is going to help us build out our projects more fully. So thank you to those who are filling that out. I'll give just a couple more seconds in case anybody else would like to answer this poll. Great. And there's just going to be one more poll that I'm going to do for you all, which is just going to touch on your familiarity with solar. So do you know about solar? Have you not really heard much about solar? Have you already spoken to a contractor or installer, or do you already have solar? Awesome. Thank you to those who are filling out these polls. It's really helpful. Great. So it looks like we have a couple people on the call that have a little bit of familiarity with solar and one person that already has solar, which is awesome. Great, so that was the last poll. So let's get into this and get started. So first we're gonna go over just kind of the brief look at what the system components of solar are. So as you see at the top, you have your photovoltaic or PV panel. So sunlight hits that panel and produces electricity. Then it goes into an inverter or micro inverter. And this is just a system that allows the energy that is produced to be able to be used within your house. So once it reaches that inverter or microinverter, it'll then be converted and moved to your home electrical panel so that you can then use that electricity. If you're producing more solar or more electricity than you are using, the electricity flows through a utility meter to the grid. And when you get solar, you will receive a new bi-directional meter that will measure how much electricity you're producing versus how much electricity you're using. So, as I mentioned, there are two types of inverters. You have your inverter, which is the white box pictured on the left, which is usually mounted next to your electrical panel. And then the other option is a micro inverter, which are small little inverters under each panel or every other panel. Both are really great options, and your contractor or installer can help you choose which option will be right for your system. So when looking at mounting options for solar, the two main ways to mount are roof and ground mount. Roof mount is the most common, which is just mounting it on top of your roof. Ground mount is a great option if you have some extra space or you would really like your system to be not on top of your house. But it is important to note that with the ground mount, you do have to trench your like electrical system to be connected, and that can add a little bit of an extra cost. So I mentioned earlier about your bidirectional meter, which will help measure how much electricity you're using versus how much you're producing, which leads to net metering. So net metering is this ability to, when connected to the grid, gain credits and use credits that you are producing. So in these two example charts, the one on the left shows you gaining credits because you are producing more energy than you are consuming in the sunnier months of the year, typically in summer. And then when we move to the winter months, you are typically consuming more electricity since we're seeing colder weather and cloudier weather. And so you're able to use those credits that you earned in the summer months to pay for the extra electricity that you're drawing from the grid. So next we're going to talk about, is my home right for solar? So some of the key things to talk about with this is your system size, which is really based off of how big of a system you need, and mostly based off of how much energy your home consumes. So it's not necessarily super beneficial to build a system that is much larger than what your home is consuming, just because, as I mentioned with net credits, those do not roll over into the new electrical year. And so you do have to use those credits before that year runs out. So if you have a system that's much larger, you may not be able to use all of those credits that you are gaining. Other things to look at are just the available space that you have, the budget that you're under, and when looking at system size, the system size is measured in kilowatts, and the average system size is about 6 kilowatts. The other important thing to look at is your solar access. So in the northern hemisphere here in Oregon, our sun is always in the southern hemisphere. So here, the best placement for solar is on a southern roof or the southern access. It doesn't mean that you can't have solar on east or west. Those are also still really great options depending on your roof's configuration. But southern exposure is the best. And you can always talk to a contractor or installer about your solar potential when they look at your roof structure. So one other thing that is important to look at is roofing material. The two main types of roofing material are asphalt shingle and standing seam metal. Both of these are perfect options for solar, just the way that they are installed will differ a little bit. On the asphalt shingle, there will be a metal flashing, which is just kind of a a flat metal piece that will be drilled into your roof rafters underneath and will then mount the solar panels on top of that. With the standing seam metal, the panels can be screwed onto those metal seams, and so you don't have to drill into your roof with that. Your roof condition, especially if you have asphalt shingle, is really important to look at. Newer roofs are better, as when you have to replace your roof, your contractor will have to come out, remove your solar system, the roof will have to be replaced, and then the system will have to be put back on it. Another important thing to note is that the Energy Trust incentive requires at least 10 years of roof life to be able to take advantage of that. So having a newer roof will allow for that incentive. One other thing to mention is that roof structure underneath can change how your system is installed. So depending on if you have rafters or trusses, they will install it a little bit differently, but your contractor can help you identify the installation process of that. Great. So moving forward, I wanted to touch on one of the big pieces, which is solar incentives and just pricing of a solar system. So since solar has been around, we've really seen a dramatic price drop in solar systems. Um, and a lot of that has to do with the investment tax credit or the federal incentive. The three incentives here in Oregon that are most used are the investment tax credit, the solar plus storage rebate, and the energy trust incentives. So the investment tax credit was just extended at 26% of the system cost. The one thing to note with this is that you do need tax liability to take advantage of this incentive. The Oregon Solar Plus Storage rebate is up to $5,000. The thing to note with this is that funding comes in waves, and so it's really great to check with your installer about what funding looks like at this time. And then the Energy Trust incentive is up to $2,800 depending on your system size. For the Energy Trust incentive, you do have to have PGE or Pacific Power, and you must use an Energy Trust Trade Ally, which I will talk about in just a little bit. Another great program that I wanted to mention is the Solar Within Reach program. It is an Energy Trust program for low to middle income, and it is up to $9,000 per home, depending on your family size and where you are, if you have PGE or Pacific Power. And the income threshold for a family of four is $77,500 roughly. But that also changes, so it's good to look on the Energy Trust website for more information surrounding that. Great. So one thing that I wanted to just go over briefly is just a sample budget. It's really important to note that this varies significantly depending on your system, what incentives you're able to receive, and like your budget and anything that impacts your cost. So this is not necessarily a representative budget, but it's a really great look at what it could look like. So we have two different budgets here breakdown, which one is the residential for about a 6 kilowatt, and on the far right hand side we have the low to moderate income residential rebate. So both of the systems would start off at about $20,000 or so with this budget. And then after the Energy Trust incentive, if you are in those areas, that could drop that cost down for you. And so after all of these different incentives and the opportunities that are available, your final cost could be about a little over $13,000, or for low to moderate income, it could be as low as $4,500, depending on what your system looks like. Great. So the last thing I want to touch on is just how do you get started? So as I mentioned, Energy Trust Trade Allies are the only contractors that can offer you Energy Trust incentives. These trade allies are rigorously qualified and vetted through the Energy Trust system, and they are very familiar with installation requirements. So we do have, you can go to the Energy Trust solar bid page, which will take you to a screen that looks similar to this picture here on the right-hand side. And you can fill that out and you'll receive bids from multiple different companies about what your system cost will look like. And they'll be able to kind of give you quotes on what your system cost might look like. So once you've chosen your contractor, the installation process can begin. So the installation itself usually takes about 1 to 2 days. Your contractor will complete all the paperwork for things like permitting and the energy trust incentive and setting up net metering for you. Um, the only thing that the contractor can't do and what is your responsibility will be for that federal ITC credit. You are going to have to do that during the tax season. And then after installation, your contractor will also manage all of the inspections on your system. And so after that, you're all set up for solar. So the final thing that I wanted to share today was a solar story, which is a video of an individual in Portland who installed solar and he was part of our Go Zero tour in November. And so I just wanted to share this video with you.
Bungalow. There's a 7.15 kW solar system on the south facing roof, and we're gunning for our first year as zero energy. I work in the green building field, so it's definitely an obsession of mine. I manage our zero energy certifications program at Earth Advantage. So you'll see a bunch of certified Earth Advantage homes on the tour. If they're zero energy certified, we did that certification for them. When I first moved in, the house was gas and electric and completely inefficient. I did an energy audit on it, and it was going to use about $2,250 a year in energy. I think the coolest part of our story, though, is just that I really didn't think it was possible to do this on a home this old. We have ductless heat pump for heating and cooling. We have a heat pump water heater, 2x4 insulated walls, double pane windows, R30 insulation in the floor between our house and the basement, R49 in the flat attics, and only 2x4 insulation in the roof rafter. And we did as much air sealing as we could. And so the insulation, air sealing plus solar is going to get us down to zero. I think the payback period on our solar is something like 17 years. For a lot of people, that's not fast enough. It reflects our values and that we thought this was something really important to put money into, even if the payback period isn't really quick. But the fact that I can live in a zero energy house before I'm 40 years old is something I'm really proud of. It's a bright spot in a really tough time, literally and figuratively, right? You know, during the last smoke event, it was bizarre because I'm behind the scenes looking at how bad our solar production was because the smoke was out. We are not at the point where consumers are knocking down the doors demanding green certified ultra efficient homes. I do think that the reason for that is people don't know what's possible. I think when you educate a buyer on what's possible and how affordable it is and all the tangible benefits that come with it, there's a ton of value there. And there's a lot of people who are willing to spend money for it. I mean, this is where our codes will eventually catch up to. But for now, these are builders doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do for their customers. And as long as they effectively market it, I know they're seeing a return on the investment. All of our utility bills are cheaper because of this. We have cleaner air because of this. It's just the win-win-win across the board. So there's a smart way to do it. And it's, lo and behold, working with contractors that have done this before, make it pretty easy for you. So we did it backwards. We did all the active stuff first, then did the insulation later and the solar at the same time. And it all added up to this package that's hopefully going to get us there. I know in my heart of hearts that the future is electric, efficient, and renewable. Those three things should be our goals. I recognize that we moved in at a time when we could gain this value and other people just won't. For people that can't, it's do the easy stuff. Like when I first moved in, the only thing I could afford at the time was new light bulbs. But going down to the store and picking out large quantities of LED light bulbs is really cheap. So there's stuff you can do on your own, and then there's much harder stuff, but do all the little stuff. I didn't think any of this was possible when I moved in 6 years ago. Just doing the little things as they come up makes a lot of sense. I think everybody tries to do the best they can, and I truly believe that they are. I hope that we're a little bit of a motivator for other people, that you can do a little more.
Great. So that was Ryan's video, and now I'm going to look to see if we have any questions. Please feel free to put some questions in the chat or the Q&A. Doug asked if this talk will be available to view after this presentation. Yes, I will be sending an email either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, and it will have a recording of this presentation. It will also have a survey for you to fill out, as well as some handouts that kind of detail some of this information that we've gone through, and also that has some links to websites for Energy Trust or other pertinent information. Let's see. Rhonda asked if that link will get her enrolled in junk email from solar companies for the rest of her life. It's a great question. My parents actually used that link for their own home recently, and they got 4 installers that reached out to them, and it was just kind of a one-time reach out, and then they were able to sort through and reach back out to those solar contractors. So it won't be and shouldn't be a constant onslaught of information or emails. It should just kind of be a one-time, they'll reach out to you and see what you're interested in. Do we have any other questions while we're on here? I just wanted to thank you all for joining and being a part of this. I hope it was helpful information for you. We can stick around for a couple more minutes if anybody else has any questions. Gary said in the chat, if you have a well-insulated home with 10 plus years of roof life, financing solar panels with Puget Sound Commercial Credit Union. Basically, that you can roll almost all of that cost into the loan. Yeah, I've heard really great things about Puget Sound Commercial Credit Union and their loan opportunities for solar. Rhonda asked if I also need a new roof. Can some of these contractors do that as well? That's a really great question. From the contractors that I've spoken to, they don't do re-roofings, but I know that they know a lot of really great roofing companies that they're able to help you get in touch with and kind of speed up that process. They're usually really well connected in that area, so they'll be able to get people in place pretty quickly for that. Great. Any other questions from anyone? I'm not seeing anything else, so we'll end just a few minutes early. Oh, Gary says wait. So that email that I mentioned will have a survey for anyone that signed up for this webinar. We really appreciate your filling that out. We've changed our How to Go Solar events a little bit to make them shorter and easier for people to get onto. And we're trying to change up the times to offer some more events like this one, a midday event. So if you could fill that out for us and tell us if that is working for you and if you think that's beneficial, that would be really, really helpful for us moving forward. Gary's question is, can the federal and state programs be used for upgrades to existing systems like battery storage? That's a great question. So I know that I don't believe that the federal tax credit can be used for upgrades for that. I do believe that there are talks right now in legislation here in Oregon about making that solar plus storage rebate available for upgrades to include things like adding battery storage. That rebate right now, there is no funding, but we're hoping that as legislation continues, that Oregon will increase funding for that. And hopefully we will see some ability to add add things like battery storage onto existing systems in that rebate offer as well. And Pramod just put a link for that rebate in the chat, so you can look at a little bit more information for that. Great. So without any other questions, I think that will be the end of it. But I just want to thank you all so much for joining us today and for being a part of this. Please look out for that email with more information and for the recording of this webinar. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye.